So let me begin this story with how I was an idiot, drug addicted, alcoholic, riddled with anxiety, and most definitely at my rock bottom. I had just attempted suicide due to something very traumatic. Due to this, I didn't have the best judgment, nor a good judge of character at the time. I started hanging around with a very nasty crowd. Grunge, punk rock, loved to party, never had their own cash. Destructive, impulsive, you get the drill. An ex-friend of mine, let's call him Sideshow Bob I guess, started hanging out with me quite a bit, more and more as the weeks passed by. Bob here worked as a pizza delivery driver. He never, and I mean never, washed his clothes, and he owned maybe 3 outfits in total, including his work uniform. The others were women's clothes. The women's clothes he wore to be punky. I didn't really see any shame in that. I even thought it was cool how he didn't care what others thought about it. That also meant, though, that he liked my clothes. So, like a little sister might do, he constantly took my clothes and wore them. Keep in mind, he also barely showered. Often, if he even woke up before 5 p.m. in time for work, he would jump off my couch, grab a pack of my cigarettes without asking, and take off. Within the 4-month period he stayed in my home, I literally saw him bathe only 5 times. His feet? Oh, those feet were the worst I've ever smelled. Long after the situation was dealt with, and he was gone, my carpet had still absorbed that scent. I tried everything to remove it, but alas, that home was left with his stench baked into it. He paid nothing, not a single bill. Never contributed to groceries, cleaning, nor was he on my lease, yet he established residency in my home legally. That didn't bother me so much in the moment. As I said, I was at my rock bottom, and was basically just happy to have someone to shit show with me. I considered him my goofy, annoying, and stinky best friend. That was until that wasn't enough for him. He began to become very obsessed with me. Very quickly, he went from basically having everything he needed in life for free, while he kept any money or tips he made, to deciding of his own accord that we were meant to be together. Things got pretty awkward from there. If I'd return from work or a friend's house or wherever, he'd start crying and follow me room to room, asking repeatedly why we couldn't just be together. We were best friends already, so we should date. I was not attracted to him, and going through a divorce at that time. I didn't want to ruin our friendship. It got to the point where I started to avoid going home altogether. I'd rather stay with my mother or my friends, because he was non-stop desperately trying to convince me to be with him. I'd often find him skulking into my bed at this point. He quit his job to have a better chance of seeing me. I told him if this continued, I would no longer allow him to stay with me. At one point, after avoiding him for a few days on end, Sideshow Bob really started to come out of his shell. He cornered me, screaming, "I'm sick and tired of being rejected by you fucking women. It's not happening anymore." Now I was scared. I'd never seen him as a threatening individual before, just a goofy character. You might be thinking I was leading him on, but that's not the case. He had been my friend for many years and was even at my wedding. He was fully aware I had no feelings. Now I was genuinely afraid of him. I asked him to leave and he was no longer welcome. He refused though, and said by law he was required 30 days notice to be evicted. When I spoke with the police, they understood my situation, but explained that he was right. Either he'd have to be officially evicted or I'd have to get a restraining order. I filed the restraining order, which they immediately granted me, but of course he chose to ignore it. Once he left my home, I locked all the doors and windows. When he returned, I showed him the order, to which he replied, "You stupid cunt, I'm not leaving." I tried calling the police every time he showed up, but by the time they'd get there, he would already be gone. There were shoe prints on the door and cracks from all the attempts he made to force it open. It would never shut correctly after all those attempts. They were never able to officially serve him because I guess they couldn't find him. I honestly believe, though, that they only tried once and then gave up. I'd provided them with his plates, friends' addresses where he stayed, previous employment, everything they needed. I'd stay up late at night, hearing his vehicle. It was loud and easily identified. He would slowly drive by my home over and over, day and night. I'd be scared looking through my window, always with my phone in hand preparing. One time, he even hid behind my front door and had a mutual friend knock, then jumped out when I attempted to open it and tried to shove the door open and enter. He even went as far as to message my young underage nephew on Facebook to try and gain sympathy and convince him to change my mind. It was a living nightmare. Eventually, though, he moved on to his next obsession, and I was somewhat at peace. Several months later, he was on our local news for attempting to slit his ex-girlfriend's throat and beating her unconscious. That was until a neighbor rushed over and he fled. All I could think about was how that could have easily been me. Apparently, free housing, food, cigarettes, and everything else except a romantic relationship was not enough. Summer 2017. I was working at a pharmacy. I had been there for about 4 years now. A new pharmacist around my age, 28 at the time, was hired. He seemed a bit odd, but I was nice to him because everyone else was rude to him immediately, and I felt quite bad for him. He asked me way too many questions though. Some I answered, but others crossed boundaries. Fast forward about a month, and he said he was moving. He lived on the east side of my city, and he said he was moving to the west side, which just so happened to be where I lived. He said he'd actually found a house near the intersection of where I lived. When I asked him what street it was on, he wouldn't tell me. He also said the owner would live there for a few more months, so I pretty much forgot about it. Fast forward a few months later, though. My mom and stepdad told me they'd just met our new neighbor. Our house is one house away from the intersecting street. This house was on the intersecting street, so we were one house away, but the backyards connected. My mom said he seemed like a really nice young man. The next time I worked with that coworker, I asked him if that man was him, and he said no. I let it go for a little bit. Another time, though, he started asking me questions, describing my backyard and asking if my street name started with the letter that it did. Then he finally admitted my new neighbor was him. I asked him how he knew this was my house, and he said he'd watched me in the backyard. He'd decided not to say anything to me, though. The next few months were quite weird. I was still friendly with him as a coworker, but he started to cross more and more boundaries. He knew my birthday was coming up, for example. My birthday and address are in the pharmacy database, and my brother was asking for ideas for what to get for me. I wanted a certain phone case, so I was browsing on my phone to send my brother links to the ones I wanted. This coworker would always look over my shoulder when I was on the phone. I guess he saw the type of phone case because he got me that exact one and a $150 preloaded Visa gift card. I told him in a very professional manner that I felt like these gifts were inappropriate and honestly probably against company policy. I walked over to his mailbox while he was at work to return it to him. He kept putting it back in my mailbox though, with messages begging me to accept it because I made him so happy. I ended up giving it away. Not much longer after, I took my other coworker, a female one, to the zoo. I had posted some of it on my Snapchat story. He kept messaging me on Snapchat asking me questions about it. It was bothering me, so I blocked him. After that, he found my mother's number, called her up and told her he needed to talk to her. He told her he needed to come over right now, so she invited him in and they talked. I was very alarmed by this, but she thought it was endearing for whatever reason. I told him once again at work he was crossing boundaries. He said that he did everything he did because he cared about me though, and didn't understand where I was coming from at all. There was also a lot of pestering and trying to look at photos on my phone to figure out who my boyfriend was, going through all my coworkers' phones and reading their conversations with me even. He even tried impersonating them while I was not at work to get more of my info. One time he cornered me and wouldn't let me leave until I told him the characteristics I look for in a guy. He was also mad at me when I got birth control prescription filled, even though it was being used to correct my hormonal problems. I started being mean to him at this point because I couldn't take it anymore. He then told me that I was treating him that way because he was a nice guy who cares about me and that I was just looking for a jerk. It became a very hostile work environment. I finally left about 2 months ago. This is a side note. Other coworkers and neighbors started to hate him because he loved to start confrontations. He'd also play the he said, she said with people for entertainment. The neighbors have even called the police on him before, and everyone thinks he's crazy. I haven't heard from him at all since leaving, but I saw one of my former coworkers last week at a get-together, and she said he was trying to get her to tell him where I work now. He told her he sees me getting into my car every morning, so he knows I have a new job. I told my mom this, but she didn't take it very seriously. She never seems to believe I'm in danger. I would just like to get an outside perspective. When I come home late, I run in the door, and if no one is home, I wait to take a shower, because I'm still scared of this guy. This is my brother's girlfriend's story. Just to let you know, I'm going to tell it from the first person. I go to a school in a big city that's one of the least safe cities in the US. I chose this school for nursing education, and definitely not for the location. I live in a row house, I guess that's what you call it, off campus with 4 other girls. It's cheaper and nicer than the dorms, or at least we thought so. I guess in the end you get what you pay for though. We're all girls and sophomores in college. As you would guess, we go out, drink, come back, do things we don't remember. We had just started our rent in August, 3 floors plus a basement, which was padlocked by the owners. That was understandable. We definitely would have had parties down there to avoid the immediate cleanup if they hadn't done that. The house was great and in a pretty amazing location compared to school and work. I'm a CNA who works odd hours. It was not that expensive, and the house was in pretty good condition. I had never lived with that many people before, just one roommate usually. So very often things would get misplaced or changed and nobody would know who'd done it. I started to notice my snacks would either be half gone or completely gone randomly. I was getting pretty annoyed, but a house of many people is too much work to try and figure out who was doing this. Slowly, as girls do, we started making comments about someone eating all our food, but, kind of passive-aggressively. You know how some college girls are. In the end, we all just let it go though, because nobody wanted the whole house to start fighting. That would be an even worse environment. I worked until about 11 in the NICU, got home about 11:30 mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pans left out or snack wrappers lying around. I thought that was a bit weird because none of my roommates had ever done that before. Oh well though, maybe they drank a bottle of wine and then went to bed and forgot. Again though, all my roommates started making comments about this. This time we started to ask each other because it was getting really annoying, all our food being gone, things being left around. I knew it had to be one of them. But who wants to admit they were doing something like this? We chalked it up to the girl who always smoked and ate her own weight in food. She swore up and down it was not her though. This went on for about 2 months or so. It got more and more obvious that someone was clearly taking food from everyone. Definitely the girl that always smoked. I could watch her eat a whole snack pantry in a night. I wish it was her though. One night at work, I was about to get off, but a situation happened, and I didn't end up leaving until 12:30. I took the bus home, and right as I arrived, I was about to collapse. I just wanted to jump into bed ASAP. I walked in the front door. The stairs were directly in front of me, and I could see down the side into the kitchen. As I walked in, I saw someone standing in there, but was way too tired to say hello. This could end in a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I just went straight upstairs. When I got to the second floor, I noticed all my roommates' doors were closed, which always meant they were either all in their room for the night or asleep already. I got a weird feeling, something that made it click. They were all asleep, right? I texted our house group chat, asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and said the other 2 were already asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911, but I didn't call just yet. I crept into my roommate's room across the hall. Thankfully, or maybe not so thankfully, she didn't have her door locked. I whispered to her, telling her someone was in the house with us. She gave me the widest eyes ever and almost looked like she was going to cry. She didn't suspect what I did, but for reference, this was a very bad area, as in there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down only weeks earlier by a home intruder. She mouthed to make the call. The whole time we were dead silent. We didn't hear anything at all. I was starting to think I was just seeing things after a long day at work and was regretting that I'd dialed in the first place. I was going to look like an idiot when they showed up, and I was just overtired and dreaming. We explained what was going on, and they said they would send someone ASAP. They actually did mean right away, since it was such a dangerous city. The police showed up relatively quickly. I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed it was them, so I did. The whole time, I swear the operator could hear my heart beating through the phone. The police came in and looked around. I was thinking, oh God, I look so dumb. They asked if there were any other floors, and we told them technically there was the basement, but it was padlocked, so not really. They checked the basement just in case, and yeah, they were right. A man had been living in that padlocked basement. The lock had been broken off and was just kind of propped against the wall. We never looked at that area because we rarely went down there. The man had taken a comforter from one of my roommates out of the hall closet, a mattress from God knows where, and his clothes too. He was the one moving and eating all our stuff. He would emerge in the middle of the night to do it. He started getting more comfortable though. I don't know if he was drugged out and forgot to clean his tracks or what. Maybe he really didn't care anymore. Me and my roommates have pretty consistent schedules during the week, so that probably made him think that any time after 12 was good to emerge. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that's what freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment, and we had no idea. When he was getting arrested, I was the only one to go down and look. I don't know why I did. I wish I didn't. This happened on Monday. I just opened a little boutique inside of a popular touristic courtyard. It's generally a very safe and wealthy neighborhood, as it's right next to a religious landmark, and there are always police walking through. And that's why it never crossed my mind that something bad would happen in that area. The courtyard is set up where there's a row of 5 shops, the last one being connected to a theater at the corner. I'm the last shop. It isn't a fancy theater, by the way. Think more like a small training ground for little kids. It's technically upstairs, so the foyer is just the entrance to the stairs that weaves around upward, and the underneath is extra space for posters they put out near the front door. I work alone and I'm a girl. I'm 5'5" and 105 pounds after a full Thanksgiving meal. Mondays are usually pretty dead. I really was the only shop that was open on my courtyard side because I had furniture that needed to be set up. I was putting it together when a tall, lanky dude came to look at my window display outside. It was cold as fuck, so he was wearing a hoodie with a vest on. We made eye contact and he smiled. He motioned me outside, as if he had a quick question or something. I didn't really think anything of it. As I went to meet him though, he made a beeline into the theater entrance and stood underneath the stairs in the corner, leaning creepily on the wall. My alarm bells started going off because this dude obviously didn't have a question about my store. He was deliberately leading me away from the public eye. I stayed put outside of the theater area and spoke to him loudly. His off-putting smile dropped, and he started muttering softly in a different language. It was immediately apparent whatever his plans were had gone awry. Once he realized I was not going to come inside, he couldn't make eye contact, and an overall demeanor of dejection came over him. It was kind of weird. He started repeatedly adjusting his hood, taking it on and off over and over again. I went back inside my shop, but 5 minutes later he was already back. He was pretending to look at my merchandise, but clearly kept looking up at me to check if I was watching or not. This went on for what felt like an eternity, until he then sauntered into the center of my store and made his way to the counter, touching everything on the way past. By then, all the hair was standing up on my neck. We were in a corner where no one was around. He was clearly blocking the door, and my only weapon was a box cutter. He'd literally trapped me in the shop. He picked up one of my products and slowly looked me up and down. "Well, you could come up with a better idea than this," he said. I was freaking out because he was holding a heavy-ass geometric candle that was pointy in some areas. It could easily be used for a weapon in a pinch. I somehow managed to keep my cool though. The silence was clearly making him uncomfortable. He then asked me to use my bathroom, which was behind the counter where my valuables were. I realized if he went back there, he would be even harder to kick out, so I shut him down pretty quick. It kind of happened in a blur, but he admitted he didn't have any money. I grabbed my box cutter and yelled at him to get the fuck out. In my head, I was expecting him to strike at any second, but instead he left and started to stand in front of the store in the courtyard. He just kept looking directly in at me. I looked back. It was terrifying. I think at this point I was in complete fight mode, so I forget a lot of the details. I ended up locking everything down and calling the management. We never broke eye contact while I did so. When he realized I was calling someone, he quickly got up and left. Management came pretty quickly. I think as I was explaining the situation to them, they realized how serious the chain of events was. Luckily, no one was hurt. I do wish I'd gotten a photo of this guy while I was calling the management though. It's possible he was just a homeless guy asking to use the bathroom or something, but he smelled like cologne and his clothes weren't shabby. He could have just asked like a normal guy. It was the whole staring and trying to lead me into the theater that made my gut scream something wasn't right.